So hopefully a meaningful session for all of you here. A warm welcome. Sorry. Who was here for the Beckham session? Who in the audience was here from the Beckham session? Mr. David Beckham. That's it? 2 or 3? That was an interesting point he shared. So, as an opening for our session, Unlocking the Strategic Value of Corporate Innovation, Mr. Beckham said something very interesting. And I thought I should just emphasize that and then do the intro. He spoke about unlocking value from his brand beyond football. So, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. He said very specifically, I look at creating value by creating teams outside of football. And that's where, that was very inspiring. So, thank you so much, James, Kain, and Matt, for joining us. And since our conversation is about unlocking value, I thought instead of me doing the intro, I'll let you do the intro. What value is your organization creating for some people who don't know your organization, and what value you are creating? Short and crisp. Let's start with Matt.
Okay, thanks very much. Talk about David Beckham, by the way. I'm not David Beckham, for the people who may not know what he looks like. Because what happened just now, after the session, I walked out of the room. It was my friend Daniel who's here. The 2 ladies come to me and say, can we take a picture with you? And they probably thought, they've never seen David Beckham. They probably thought I was him.
Wow.
So I'm not a person. But yeah, so I'm originally from the Netherlands, but I've been in Malaysia and Singapore for the last 15 years. I work with one of the largest conglomerates in Malaysia called Sunway. For the people who don't know what we do, so we are in a lot of different business, ranging from construction, development, healthcare. We have an education group with more than 25,000 students. We even have a theme park. But what's interesting to mention, where people don't know who we are, is that we build cities. We build integrated cities in Malaysia. And our flagship city outside Kuala Lumpur was actually built on an abandoned tin mine. So you can imagine 40 years ago, that was like an abandoned land. It was like a moon crater with 2 deep holes in the ground. And our chairman and founder had a vision to turn it into a city, what it is today. We have more than 30,000 trees growing in and around the city. It's a very fertile ground. We have even got worms coming out of the soil, showing the fertility. And so when I joined almost 8 years ago now, there was this infrastructure of what we call a 15-minute city. Everything is accessible within 50 minutes of where you are. And started thinking about, okay, what can we do when it comes to innovation? And honestly, at the beginning, it was very frightening because you had all these business units with CEOs who have been very successful, and they've become the little Napoleons in the company. And so to propose to them is like, hey, this is what you need to work with more startups or more technologies, is not really what they want to hear. So the way we started as an innovation lab is to focus on talent. As I said earlier, we have 25,000 talents in and around our university. And so we built a platform to help those students to build out their ideas into real solutions that they could then test out within the city, which we now call like a living laboratory. And beyond that, we started then to build out a corporate venture capital arm. We run accelerator programs, and we even do cross-border programs to get access from the external when it comes to new innovations. And I'll stop there.
That's interesting. So a lot of capability building, that's your value creation. Kain.
Thanks. So maybe let me introduce our company first. NewWorld Development is one of the leading property developers in Hong Kong. And our business is quite diverse, not only the construction or property development, but also we have retail and hospitality and healthcare. From the corporate vision perspective, we want to create shared value and tie our business success with social progress. As my role, besides to make my boss happy and keep my team busy, I also leverage technologies to empower, ensure, and enable our business to create practical innovations.
Awesome. James.
Yeah, I guess everyone knows about Microsoft. So let me talk about a little bit about Microsoft for startups. So starting year 2012, we realized startups are very important ecosystems for Microsoft. So that's where we established original Microsoft Venture Accelerator. So through the years in China alone, I incubated more than 800 startups. The valuation already exceeds about 70 billion US dollars. So part of my nickname is Mr. Solution 800. It's not really because of Microsoft, because of those startups, right? So Microsoft is always a platform company. We actually, our main business now helping every enterprise to do digital transformations. But we have our first party solution and technologies. We recruit startups, so hopefully they will build their innovation on top of Microsoft technologies. But as a startup founder, entrepreneurs, a lot of times you want to raise money, you want to go to market, you will maybe want to find a product market fit. You have a technology, you need to work with the enterprise under these needs. So Microsoft for Startups, we work kind of backwards. On one hand, we are a consulting company for the larger enterprise to understand their needs, what their open innovation needs. Then we matchmaking those startups. So we are being super connected startups with VCs, PEs, and then corporate. So in some hands, we create a value for Microsoft customers as well as startups. Otherwise, they would not be able to meet the customer. Somehow, I have a happy customer for Microsoft, and then also the startups which I'm serving. So in that sense, we can create a value proposition both for the enterprise, Microsoft, as well as the startups.
Thank you so much, James. And for some folks who would like to also know what value I'm creating, what do I do at CollabCentral? Mentioned, I'm a change facilitator and innovation coach, so I focus on actually bringing the entrepreneur way of working and entrepreneurship in large corporates, MNCs, to drive 0 to 1 in simple ways. So let's get started. Any guesses why I might be holding this? Okay, so we are a big fan of analogies, right? Innovation. So we thought, why don't we bring an analogy for our session today, for the next 20 minutes. So imagine this is the innovation we are creating. There is something inside, right? Something inside which we need to see if is valuable to invest to further grow or not. Yeah? So imagine. So the next 20 minutes of our talk, we'll try to focus on how do corporates, when you work with them or in your organization, decide what is even valuable in this? Should we invest? Should we do something about this or throw it out? Before we talk about how to unlock, let's decide what's valuable. So let's start with Kain. In your organization, how do you decide what to keep, what to throw?
I believe nowadays there is a lot of innovation projects in all corporate. And the way how we decide what we should continue and what we should give up is, I will make simple 3 criteria. The first one is, of course, we need to have the positive financial benefit. And this is quite straightforward. And second, we want to make sure this innovation is scalable, because we don't want this as one-time innovation, and we don't want it's quite labor intensive. We need to spend a lot of efforts to make it growth, and which is easy to be replicated. And this is one of the second criteria is important. And third, and I think it's the most important, is from corporate perspective. We have our existing business. We hope anything we're going to do can create synergies with our existing business. So how to make the innovations is not an individual innovations. How to become an multipliers to our existing core business is the third criteria. So for NewWorld, how we decide to identify the valuable innovations, we use these key 3 criteria.
Very interesting. I think the key word from what I heard is synergy. It's also important. Like you said, innovation not for the sake of innovation. What about you, James, at Microsoft for Startups?
Yeah, as I said, I'm a super connected doing matchmaking, but all the matchmaker is not created equal. So for our side, given we are a technology companies, we're helping the corporate client to do digital transformations. Most of Fortune 500 companies are Microsoft customers. So we really understand the enterprise. We advise the enterprise. We understand needs. For startups, a lot of times they have technologies, but sometimes they're not what call it enterprise ready. They don't know how to sell to enterprise. They don't understand this. It's like, okay, today I get a chance to meet maybe Mercedes. Tomorrow I expect a paycheck. But corporate doesn't really work that way. So for Microsoft, first of all, we work with our corporate. We understand their needs, and then, then we're going to go look at the startups. And then we also make sure those startups already pre-approved, and prepare them what it's enterprise ready. A lot of times the startups, that technology company, they don't really know how to sell value. They're still just talking about the technologies. But for business, we all mentioned, it's all about how you're going to create, top line or help the company to improve efficiency, for the bottom lines, right? So in that sense, we have to do a lot of work, not just simply in matchmaking. We have to make sure the solution is viable and it was validated by us. And on the corporate side, a lot of times we talk about innovations. A lot of times I want to make sure they're also ready. They don't waste enterprise startup time, because the founder's time is super valuable. So we kind of have to be working very hard to make sure those sides to understand this, so that we can make a very efficient connections for both corporate and startups.
Great. I think one key word which I took away is readiness. Because if matchmaking has to be successful, there has to be some level of readiness. Matt, what about you?
Okay, maybe building on your analogy, I think about food when I think about different pots with lids on it. And being based in Malaysia, we love our foods, if anyone has been there. And if you come in my kitchen, my wife is Malaysian, you see a lot of different jars with different spices, and she knows exactly what to use and how to cook it. But when you start a corporate innovation program and imagine you don't know how to cook,
Right.
what do? Right? So you can either watch like some Gordon Ramsay videos and see the magic, how he does everything, how he puts everything together, or you can start experimenting. So the solution is probably in a combination of both. You learn from others what has worked and what hasn't. But at the end of the day, you have to start experimenting. Start with some salt first and some pepper before you add the chili and everything, right? Because maybe you don't like that. And I think it's the same thing for us. Like I said earlier, we started with talent, unlocking the talent. The talent is always key when it comes to innovation. It doesn't matter what you want to build, like a fancy AI or a blockchain, you need that talent to come and develop it further. And I think, we've made a lot of mistakes. I think we've made a lot of nasty dishes that just taste really bad. And it maybe looked very fancy on the outside and created some nice PR, but it was not good. So we threw that out, right? We threw that out. For example, when we started doing corporate venture capital, we made the biggest beginner mistake in thinking that we could just invest into startups and take a majority share, and thinking that those entrepreneurs are very willing to work with us, right? And to be absorbed and be working with a large conglomerate and using our resources. We were absolutely wrong, right? And so from there we learned, and we started to make smaller investments, taking smaller stakes. We put money into other funds, so we have a bigger sort of pool of talents and innovations that we can tap into. So it's all about learning and experimentation.
It's interesting, all three of you are, specialists and very experienced in corporate innovation, but all three organizations clearly has different approach. So the takeaway is also not one size fits all, right? One might need the perfect synergy to decide. One might need the matchmaking and exploration. One might need more experimentation. So I think that's good to decide. Now, moving on to the second part of the conversation. To unlock the value, we also, after we decide what is valuable, we have to see what's getting stuck. if we can't open this, if this is stuck, we can't unlock. So it's good to know from all of you, with one case study example, what were you trying to unlock to move from stuck to unstuck? So, you know, James, let's start from you. You work with so many startups and corporates. Any one mission, what were you trying to solve, the challenge and the stuck?
Yeah, you know, I work in every industry. You know, in the last 7 or 8 years, I work with more than 150 Fortune 500 companies to do innovations. As I just mentioned, corporate have their own goals, and every industry is very different. You know, you talk about retail and versus healthcare, you know, versus maybe auto industry. It will be very different in that way. But startup also, they have their own pace, you know, to do this. You know, a lot of times, and startup is moving very quickly, and then corporate, you know, especially when I set up a meeting with startups with a corporate, a lot of times corporate in the last few years established innovation department, but a lot of times the decision making is after the corporate BUs, you know. So there's still a couple of steps when startups meet the corporate innovation department, and for them a solution actually landed doing maybe a POC at the BU. It's very complicated, especially the B2B sales versus, you know, startups, sometimes they don't understand that part, how corporate works. So, so from that side, as a facilitator, we have to work very closely with the corporate.
Right.
A lot of times the corporate also meaning a culture change. You know, a lot of time innovations not necessarily is also for corporate have to change, depends on the type of the business they're in. So as a Microsoft, I constantly introduce various different corporate, how other corporate do corporate innovations.
Nice.
So that they understand the best practice and then learn how to work with startups, as well as startup have to understand, you know, and then they get their solution ready so that the corporate can move forward, right?
Very, very interesting. So it's also about the steps in the process of how do you engage them. That could be the stuck before you need to unlock. So very curious, Kain, from your experience at NewWorld, what challenge are you guys constantly facing before unlocking?
Before unlocking, I think for all the innovations, we need to involve different parties, and we need buy-in, not only from internal, but sometimes from external. So one of the examples is we established a new fintech startup based on blockchain 1 year ago. What we've done is we want to solve one issue in the industry. For all the construction projects, cash flow management is one of the critical issues need to manage by all parties, because all construction projects in a 3 to 5 years long project. And some subcontractors, especially for the low tier contractors, they need to pay the CapEx to buy materials first, but they receive the payment the last. So their cash flow is quite challenging. And sometimes they already consume all their credit line from bank's perspective, but they still be able to deliver more project if they can have more cash. So from a property developer perspective, if we can solve their cash flow issue, it will make sure our project can be delivered on time. So we're trying to find a solution for this. And so what we want to do is we want to engage with different banks to provide them some third-party data, such as our project data. We can see that based on the project progress, we'll know the supplier will get the payment soon. And based on the suppliers, their historical performance, they can deliver the project on time. So this can be the third-party data to help bank to redo the credit assessment and get them more loan. But this is quite challenging because we disrupting how banks doing credit assessment. So we need to get buy-ins from not a small company. It's a quite traditional, well with compliance industry. Need them to follow our new ideas. So this is one of the challenges we are faced before.
There is something common between what both of you share, right? Stakeholder engagement. Everybody needs to engage the stakeholders to make things move. We love your analogy, by the way, of cooking the dishes.
Really hungry.
What challenge? What's really stuck in your case?
Yeah, I mean, just also on James' point, I feel that facilitation role is probably sometimes one of the most underappreciated jobs. You know, because on both sides you get flagged. On one way, you talk to the business units and you kind of think you know what they need. It's like, you know, that insurance agent, the annoying person who comes to you and sell your stuff, but they have very good intentions and they know what's good for your health and for your investment, but you know, you just don't want to talk to them all the time. And in the startup side, you know, they think you're too slow, whereas they don't understand all the processes involved to, you know, make that facilitation work and getting to that pilot. But I think for us, maybe to give an example, I like to do venture building and really understanding, you know, the problems that we face, building teams around it, putting the capital in place, building the business model and getting it off the ground. Very exciting in the beginning, but can oftentimes get stuck. An example from our side is an urban farm business that we started to build at the beginning of the pandemic when everyone was talking about food security. And so we thought, being in the real estate business as well, we have a lot of idle spaces, you know, rooftops, car parks, even indoor spaces that we were not renting out. And so we had this ideation challenge and we thought like, hey, other than, you know, doing the typical co-working space, can we think about more innovative solutions to maybe think about, can we turn those idle areas into food production spaces? And so we brought in the talent, we brought in the tech companies, we brought in even academics to co-create the solution. And so what started as a hobby and something interesting became a venture. And we got very excited about it and said, we need to scale. And so we did that for 2 years until the end of last year when we were producing about 10,000 kg per month and supplying this to the local restaurants and even to consumers. But then we came to the business plan meeting, you know, our favorite meeting with our CFO and the board members, and got very excited, you know, we did this, we even put a sustainability report together. But the first 5 minutes after we explained what we had done, the CFO pointed out, he said, well, that's great, you know, all the sustainability, but Matt, let me tell you something. The most important part in sustainability is profitability. So how are your profits? And so the rest of the hour and a half, we were grilled on our margins, we were not looking good. And so that was a shock, and we got stuck because from there we couldn't scale. We had to figure out, how do we sort out the current problems in the organizations to make it profitable? And so, yeah, so that's where we are. We have some ideas now how to turn it around. And one of them is to focus more on our own staff. We have 16,000 staff. How can we think about using the facilities that we have as a training bed?
Yeah, we'll come to
Train them up, get them involved into how to build their own food in their offices, and we charge for that because they have a lot of training budgets that are not being used. And those are very profitable mechanisms. And so we are doing that now. While we're figuring out our business model and getting more leaner and cutting costs, we're running a lot of workshops, which are with 95% profit margins on it. So.
But what's interesting, Matt, is, and I'm listening to you for the first time on this story, at the beginning you mentioned about experimentation as one of the ways you create value. On the other hand, CFO challenged you on profitability. As an independent third-party view, I feel you got stuck on expectation management.
Yeah, true. That's very tough.
Yeah, so I think sometimes to drive innovation forward and unlocking, it's about expectation management as well. So
can I add on
sure,
one more point?
please.
I just like inspired about what you mentioned. You know, sometimes like the corporate, we don't know. We know what we don't know. But then there's another part that we don't know what we don't know. So I think this is a very interesting part of our blind spot. And that's the beauty of working with external startups or others. It just opened up an eye, and then, that's why I constantly bring a lot of startups working with the corporate, and then that's the comment they give to us. I think as a stakeholder, like you and Karen, there's a lot of consensus building, and also educate the other stakeholder what on the part they don't know what they don't know. That also brings some interesting perspective. Because we all talk about digital transformation, AI. If you don't do that, a lot of times your business maybe get disrupted. You should not get so comfortable. As our job is constantly work with external ones and then do a lot of innovations. But many other people focus on their day-to-day business, so they didn't get a exposure on those kind of things.
James, we love the word you just said, consensus building. And that leads to our third bit of unlocking the strategic value of innovation, perhaps. So when you guys were in the process on these projects and these approaches to unlock, what technique or approach really worked to unlock? So let's start with Kain on this example you just shared.
Yeah, for the supply chain financing case I just shared, the way how we to unlock this is, nowadays all people knows that data is valuable. The data, all data is valuable, but all company they want to monetize from data. But how we can do this? If we only start from our corporate perspective, because we are quite familiar with those data, it's hard to have new ideas. But in my case, just share, if we can use those data to help banks to create new value, that can be benefit back to our whole supply chain. So the way is how we use data as a key to benefit not only us, but also our stakeholders, to create value to them, and also to generate the win-win situations eventually.
I love that. If you want to create value, don't just focus on self. Create value for somebody else. Matt.
So for the example I gave just now, I think it comes down to back to basics, right? Like, how do you build a profitable business? I think that's very important. Stakeholder management, of course, managing expectations, super key, and that can change. But the other thing that we thought about, by doing training and involving the whole group of companies is, and that's sometimes overlooked, of the kind of qualitative aspect of corporate innovation, is to build up the right stories, the narrative, and getting the kind of visibilities and stories, and makes it so much easier, because then people start to believe in what you do. When the staff is involved, the senior management get involved, and then somehow things get unlocked a lot easier, and also the important money pot that you need to keep growing, right? So it's both sides. It's back to basic, getting the right business model, finance in place, and at the same time building the culture around the group through training.
Very interesting. James, do you have something to add on in terms of narrative building? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First of all, as I mentioned, I've done so many corporate. Every corporate also in different level of innovations depends on the industry. So a lot of times, meaning it's evangelism for me to be a trust advisor to give them examples for other corporate innovators how to do things. So that's another part for the corporate. And then also, as I mentioned, I work mostly with Fortune 500 companies within the region. So a lot of times they have to make stakeholders explanations to the global for things why China is so different, why they have to do something very unique and not really follow the corporate rule, break the rule. And then I think there's another aspect is China, not just in China for China. There could be a lot of innovations could be in China for global. So constantly, I also run what I call a China Digital Learning Trip for a lot of multinational Fortune 500 company, global C-suite, visit China to get a first-hand experience for this. So my job is almost like an innovation tourism guide within China, host a lot of CEOs to come here. Given the Microsoft, and then we are trust partners, they constantly can have a chance. So I think this is the part of the job of constantly have to be educated to various different stakeholders. It could be internally, could be a headquarter people to understand this. And then on the startup side, certainly I mentioned to teach them how to be enterprise ready. And then recently, given we are technology companies, now with the generative AI, we even experiment how we gonna be using technology helping startups who may be purely, technology companies. They don't really know how to position or selling their values to a corporate CEOs. So it's all technical jargon when, the business side, they all, CFOs, they all care about bottom lines, right? So we now have some prompt engineering to actually feed those kind of technologies to ChatGPT, generate something for a startup to understand how to pitch to a business user. Just a few examples.
Very interesting. I'm learning some new stuff from you guys. So, I think just a few minutes ago in the room we were also discussing, and one thing inspired me which the audience also might like to hear. For unlocking the value for innovation, there is an important factor of talent, which you also mentioned, Matt. So just curious, what approach or technique have all three of you, any of you have taken to experiment and hire out of the box? Like, what's your talent or culture approach to make all of these things successful? Any point of view?
Yeah, maybe one thing. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is the typical entrepreneurship, hackathons, accelerated programs. They're very useful. But one thing maybe to share what worked for us, which gave some very interesting results, was that when you think about talent, you think about these must be the young people. And sometimes the older people within a corporate think, hey, am I not a talent? So one of the things is, like, we always believe that the people in the business units are the mentors to the younger people, right, to the students, and to come up with their new innovations, give them feedback. But actually what we found in running these programs is that the feedback that the young people gave to the corporate was very interesting, and they really took that on board, on agility, on using new technologies like AI, and and they are much faster, right, in picking up new tools and technologies. So maybe that's something that we can try out, that the mentor is not always the older person, but can also be the younger talent. Yeah.
Right, or somebody from outside your industry. Anybody else here?
Yeah, I think from a corporate perspective, the way to get innovation talents is doing new hiring is always the fast way. But I would say this is not the ultimate goal, because we want the innovation to be the basic capability of all the employees in a company. This is the angle we're trying to drive. And so either to use some young people, or we hire some new team to do innovations, but eventually we want these people is performing a role like education perspective, to allow all the employees in a company can do their own innovations in the future. So with this, we will mobilize all the and motivate all the employees in a company to do innovations with some rewards, especially when some existing and experienced employee in a company, once they've done something innovative, we will promote them largely in the company to motivate more and more people to do the innovations. And in this stage, I will say it's the early stage. The ROI and profitability of innovations is not the most important, because we need the momentum of innovations be spread in the company.
So given we're running out of time, I'll do something real quick.
Yeah.
I think especially as a corporate innovator, a lot of times depends on the company culture. Sometimes the a corporate wants you to innovate, but it will not tolerate failure. But in my mind, if you not fail on something, that means you are not innovate enough, right? So I remember one story. One multinational CEOs just told me, say James helping my innovation head. So the story is so interesting that the person in their mind is not doing such a great job in innovations, but they said, we still promote him, right, within the corporate. Just want to show, he's so brave, take that particular positions, and it encourages this, emphasizes with corporate to encourage this. So that's why I said the culture change is a lot more important within the corporate.
Thank you. That was a good closing statement I was about to ask. So, as one takeaway for the audience, for unlocking value, fail, create that environment to let your people fail and have that safety net. One last word, what would you advise for people in terms of one takeaway or advice for the audience? If they're driving and they're in your seat.
From a corporate perspective,
Yeah.
is it? I mean, for me, it's really coming down to the points I've been making is to experiment. Just don't be shy or afraid to try new things. It's, when consultants come to you with good programs, you can try them out, but don't be afraid to do something different, because every corporate has its own DNA, has its own structure, so what works for others doesn't necessarily work for you. So, be brave.
Be brave. Kain, for you it's a little different because many startups are sitting in the audience. If the startups want to approach people like you in the corporates, how should they handle it differently?
Then all of them should help me to make sure that all the stakeholders from corporate engaged in this project will be benefits, because we need something to create common benefits for all the stakeholders to do something they are not doing today. This is the key drivers for the parties to participate in an innovation.